first came to film us, it was Frank and I that they cut the deal with, and they were like, who is she? What is she doing here? And I said, well, she works for me. And they were like, well, there's no deal with her. We're not filming her.
Danielle Colby, once regarded as a heart and soul of American pickers, now finds herself standing in court as a defendant in a trial that has rocked the entire United States, centered around the death of Frank Fritz. Danielle's descent into darkness has come as an unprecedented shock in the world of reality television, as she now faces accusations of orchestrating a ruthless plot to frame Mike Wolfe. What could have possibly driven someone who once inspired countless fans to become the villain of the story? Why did Frank Fritz, her companion for over a decade, end up as a target of the very person he once called family? And what led Mike Wolfe, after everything that had unfolded, to take the stand and point directly at Danielle as a true killer? Watch the full video to uncover the entire truth and join us in saying a haunting farewell to Frank Fritz, a legend who slipped away from this world in heartbreaking silence. Once in court, Danielle Colby transitioned from witness to murder suspect. Initially, Colby appeared in court as a reluctant witness for the prosecution. She tried to maintain a neutral stance, avoiding getting involved in the heated arguments between the two men who were once a dynamic duo on television. However, as the investigation expanded and shocking new evidence emerged, her name unexpectedly appeared on the list of people involved, prompting the FBI to launch an investigation in December 20th, 2024. The courtroom in Davenport, Iowa, was packed as the trial of Mike Wolfe, the star of the show American Pickers, began. Mike was accused of causing the death of his longtime companion Frank Fritz, who passed away on October 1st, 2024. Initially, Frank's death was believed to be from a stroke, but later, suspicions of poisoning began to surface. The case quickly caused a public stir, especially when Danielle Colby, a close friend of both Mike and Frank, was called to testify as a key witness. Her testimony, along with the heated arguments from the attorneys and prosecutors, turned the trial into a media spectacle, revealing dark secrets about the trio's relationship. The investigation began after the FBI searched Mike Wolfe's home on October 20th. 24, where they discovered a journal belonging to Frank that hinted Mike may have had a motive to murder him, along with a vial of nerve poison in a safe. Sarah Hargrove, the lead prosecutor with over 20 years of experience in criminal cases, argued that Mike poisoned Frank to prevent a financial lawsuit and protect the American Pickers brand. In her opening statement, Hargrove asserted, Mike Wolfe is not just a television star but also someone willing to do whatever it takes to maintain power. We will prove that he intentionally poisoned Frank Fritz, a friend he once called a brother, to hide his own greed. Although Frank's death was initially reported as a stroke, new evidence such as nerve poison in Frank's blood, encrypted messages between Mike and Danielle Colby, and a $175,000 transfer raised suspicions of a murder plot. Danielle, a close colleague of both Mike and Frank, became a crucial witness. However, an unexpected moment in her testimony caused the FBI to shift their focus and place her at the center of the investigation. Sarah Hargrove, the lead prosecutor with over 25 years of experience, opened the trial with sharp arguments. She presented text messages recovered by the FBI from a backup server, in which Danielle wrote just hours before Frank was found unconscious. He is currently alone. No one is scheduled to check on him until tomorrow. The window is closed. Mike replied, handled, delete this topic. Hargrove declared, these messages clearly show a plan to eliminate Frank Fritz. Mike Wolfe, with the help of Danielle Colby, poisoned his friend to protect the American Pickers empire. She also emphasized a $175,000 transfer from one of Mike's shell companies to Danielle's account, calling it a silence fee. Mike's defense team, led by Jonathan Kessler, a renowned lawyer from Chicago, strongly argued that the evidence was insufficient and unconvincing. Kessler contended that the messages were taken out of context and could not prove any intent to murder. He claimed that the $175,000 was merely a legitimate business transaction related to the overseas accounts of the show American Pickers. In his opening statement, Kessler said, Mike Wolfe is a victim of a fabricated story meant to tarnish his reputation. Danielle Colby is being coerced into testifying against a longtime friend, and we will prove Mike's innocence. Throughout the trial, when the prosecutor presented evidence about the discovery of a vial of nerve poison in Mike Wolfe's garage, an extremely potent substance banned for civilian use, the atmosphere in the courtroom became almost frozen. However, Mike's defense lawyer immediately countered with confidence. "Your Honor, my client is a professional antiques collector." According to experts of the defense, this vial of poison is part of a World War II medical equipment collection. It shows no recent signs of use, no DNA traces of Frank Fritz on the lid, and most importantly, there's no evidence it has been opened in at least the last 10 years. To link it to Mr. Fritz's death is a completely unfounded speculation, if not downright prejudice, he added. He then presented tax records and photos from 2016 in which Mike proudly showcased his historical pharmaceutical collection in an episode that was cut from the show. Mike is a history enthusiast, not a poisoner, he asserted. As the jury remained uncertain, Danielle Colby took the witness stand on the fourth day, her eyes anxious and her voice trembling. Under the direction of Prosecutor Hargrove, she recounted the change in Mike's behavior after Frank left the show in 2021. Mike became obsessed with being the sole face of American Pickers. She shared, tears streaming down her face. When I suggested reconciling with Frank, he became angry and said, "If Frank doesn't stop demanding, I'll do something to make him quiet." I didn't think he was serious, but after Frank's death, I started a fear. Danielle also admitted to seeing Mike bring a strange liquid vial into the antique archaeology office, but she claimed she didn't know it was poison. During cross-examination, Kessler criticized Danielle's credibility. He pointed out that she exchanged more than 200 messages with Mike during the week Frank passed away, many of which discussed Frank's medication and schedule. "Mrs. Colby, why didn't you report the vial of liquid to the police immediately if you suspected Mike?" Kessler questioned. He also mentioned the $175,000 and Danielle's subsequent purchase of property in Puerto Rico, implying she took the money to stay silent. Danielle responded, "I didn't know Mike's plan. I only reported what I saw because I owe Frank the truth. That money was for business purposes, not to buy my silence." A surprising moment occurred when Prosecutor Hargrove asked Danielle about checking Frank's medication the day before he died. Danielle, somewhat embarrassed, replied, "I just looked through it to make sure Frank took the correct dose because he often forgets. I knew exactly what medication he was on and the dosage." This answer caused a stir in the courtroom as it suggested that Danielle had detailed knowledge of Frank's medication, information that matched the poison found in his medication. Hargrove immediately emphasized, "Ms. Colby, how did you know the exact dosage if you didn't intend to intervene? You provided this information to Mike, didn't you?" Danielle stammered, only saying, I just wanted to help Frank." This inadvertent testimony led the FBI to open a separate investigation into her role, suspecting she might have been the mastermind. The situation didn't end there. As soon as Danielle finished her testimony and Mike Wolf was called to the stand, he continued to deny all the charges and unexpectedly criticized Danielle with an angry tone. He declared, "I didn't kill Frank. Danielle is the one obsessed with controlling American Pickers. She always said Frank was a burden, that the show would be better without him." He claimed those messages. She pressured him to delete them to hide the fact that she was spying on Frank. Mike also insisted that the vial of liquid in the office was brought in by Danielle, and that the $175,000 was money she demanded to keep quiet about the show's shady financial dealings. Mike's testimony, though controversial, led the jury and the public to question Danielle's true motives. Less than 10 minutes later, Judge Linda Mangrove announced, "The court requests a pause in the arguments." Witness Danielle Colby is now officially the second subject of investigation in this murder case. After the trial, which was dubbed the trial of the century, Danielle became a target, and the FBI expanded their investigation, searching for evidence at her villa. The FBI investigation, right after the dramatic trial on November 20th, 24, when Mike Wolf was being prosecuted for allegedly killing Frank Fritz, the FBI shifted its focus to Danielle Colby, a close colleague of both men on the show American Pickers. Danielle's unexpected testimony in court, when she revealed detailed knowledge about the drugs Frank had been using, along with Mike's accusation that she was a murderer, prompted investigators to decide to search her home in Davenport, Iowa. Under the leadership of Special Agent Emily Rivera, an expert in financial crimes and homicide, the FBI quickly obtained a search warrant just 48 hours after the trial. The search took place early in the morning, with the FBI special agents and local police officers sealing off the area around Danielle's house. The investigation team focused on her office, which contained business records related to American Pickers as well as her personal projects, including her vintage clothing store and burlesque troupe hidden behind a bookshelf in the safe. The FBI found an encrypted hard drive containing a copy of the security footage from the cameras near Frank's house on the night he died, October 1st, 2024. Through analysis, experts determined that Danielle had taken the copy from the security company before it was handed over to the police, a clear attempt to conceal evidence. Special Agent Rivera commented, "This is not the behavior of an innocent witness." After being decrypted and analyzed, the video footage provided irrefutable evidence of Danielle's involvement. The video from a camera across from Frank's house showed Danielle driving to his home around 10:30 p.m. on October 1st, 2024, just hours before he was found unconscious. She was recorded entering the house through the back door carrying a small bag and leaving after about 15 minutes. Image enhancement software confirmed that the bag contained a glass vial identical to the one later found at Mike's house, which held a neurotoxin. More importantly, the footage showed Danielle returning to the nearby security company at 2 a.m., asking the staff to hand over a copy of the tape for security review before it was passed to the police. This action explained why the original footage had disappeared during the preliminary investigation. A key piece of evidence was found in a small wooden box in Danielle's bedroom, a glass vial identical to the one containing the neurotoxin found at Mike's house. Forensic analysis confirmed that the vial had Danielle's fingerprints on it and traces of the same toxin that had been mixed into Frank's medication. Additionally, inside the box was a scrap of paper detailing the dosage and method for mixing the poison into Frank's pills, written in Danielle's handwriting. This directly contradicted her testimony in court, where she claimed to have only glanced at Frank's medication to help him. Prosecutor Sarah Hargrove, who led Mike's case, immediately called for a separate investigation into Danielle, stating, "Colby is not just an accomplice, she could very well be the mastermind." The FBI also uncovered further evidence indicating that Danielle was the one who orchestrated the placement of the pill bottle at Mike's home with the intent of framing him. A former employee of Antique Archaeology, who requested to remain anonymous, told the FBI that Danielle had once asked him to deliver a gift to Mike's house in late September 20th, 24, just a few days before Frank passed away. The employee confirmed that the gift was a small box matching the description of the pill bottle. Moreover, through an analysis of encrypted messages, the FBI discovered that Danielle had sent Mike another message after Frank's death stating, "The bottle has been placed. Don't open it." In his latest testimony, Mike insisted, "I had no idea what was in that bottle. Danielle brought it over herself and told me to lock it in the safe. She set me up from the very beginning." Initially, Mike's testimony in court was dismissed as a desperate attempt to dodge responsibility, but the FBI is now taking his statement seriously. He continues to vehemently deny any involvement in Frank's death, emphasizing that Danielle deceived both him and the show. During an extended interrogation, he revealed, Danielle always said Frank was a burden, that he was slowing down the show. She knew the medication Frank was taking, had a key to his house, and controlled the offshore financial accounts. She used me. Mike further testified that the $175,000 was requested by Danielle to handle some financial matters, and he had no idea the money was connected to Frank's death. The financial evidence has further deepened suspicions surrounding Danielle's role. The FBI discovered that she had control over several offshore bank accounts that received a total of $3.2 million from questionable transactions related to American Pickers, including $450,000 that was withdrawn just days before Frank's death. A forensic audit report also revealed that Danielle had transferred part of that money to a personal account in Puerto Rico, where she quickly purchased a luxury property shortly after the incident. Prosecutor Sarah Hargrove stated, Danielle Colby not only framed Mike Wolfe, but she also devised an elaborate scheme to eliminate Frank Fritz, seize financial control of the show, and pin the blame on others. She used the image of feminist advocacy as a cover to conceal her crimes. The evidence found at Danielle's residence not only strengthens the case against her, but also opens the possibility of re-evaluating Mike Wolfe's role. Even though he still faces financial-related charges, at this point the focus of the case has shifted entirely to Danielle, who has emerged as a primary suspect, and her upcoming trial promises to be highly dramatic. 3. The conspiracy to isolate Frank Fritz. The relationship between Frank Fritz, Danielle Colby, and and Mike Wolfe was once the heart of American Pickers, the popular reality television show on the History Channel centered around antique hunting. This trio, Frank and Mike as the pickers traveling across the United States, and Danielle as the astute manager at Antique Archaeology, projected a friendly, family-like image. However, behind the scenes, a darker narrative began to unfold starting in 2018, when Frank started to be isolated from the show. Initially, Frank, Mike, and Danielle formed a harmonious team. Frank, Fritz, and Mike Wolfe, akin to brothers, shared a passion for antiques and co-founded American Pickers in 2010. Danielle, coordinating from the office, brought intelligence and a strong personality that helped the show stand out. However, beginning in 2018, as Frank faced health issues including chronic back pain and Crohn's disease, he became slower on trips. According to a former production assistant who requested anonymity, Danielle began referring to Frank as a burden in private conversations with Mike, suggesting that the show would be more efficient with Mike as the sole face. Frank's isolation occurred gradually but deliberately. Danielle, wielding increasing influence within the production team, persuaded producers to reduce Frank's screen time, citing his health as insufficient for long trips. She also encouraged Mike to avoid personal contact with Frank outside of work under the pretext of maintaining a professional image for the show. A coded message later discovered by the FBI, sent from Danielle to Mike in 2020, read, "Frank needs to stay in Iowa. You need to shine alone. I'll handle the rest." Mike, though reluctant, gradually acquiesced, feeling pressure from Danielle and producers to sustain American Pickers' success. He later testified in court, "I didn't want to distance myself from Frank, but Danielle made me believe it was the only way to save the show." By 2021, Danielle accelerated the plan to remove Frank. She arranged secret meetings with Mike and the producers, emphasizing that Frank no longer fit the show's new direction, which focused on quicker trips and more dynamic content. According to Frank's diary, retrieved by the FBI after his death on October 1st, 2024, he wrote, "D&M whisper, every time I enter, I feel like an outsider in my own show." Frank was forced to leave American Pickers in July 20th, 21, officially due to health reasons, but he believed Danielle had manipulated Mike to push him out. In a 2025 interrogation, Mike tearfully stated, "Losing Frank was the most painful thing in my life. I let Danielle Colby take control because I thought she was right, but I was wrong." Mike's anguish deepened when Danielle began pressuring him to transfer the American Pickers brand and rights to her starting in 2022. Danielle, serving as a financial manager at Antique Archaeology, controlled offshore accounts that received $3.2 million from dubious transactions related to the show. She threatened to expose these dealings, which could damage Mike's reputation, if he didn't agree to the transfer. A coded message from Danielle to Mike in 2023, recovered by the FBI, stated, "Sign the contract or everyone will know the truth about the money. You have no choice." Cornered, Mike signed the transfer agreement in August 20th, 23, just days before Danielle received a $175,000 transfer from one of his shell companies, suspected by the FBI to be a hush fee. Danielle's manipulation didn't stop there. She continued to consolidate power by controlling the show's content, from staging antique discoveries to ensuring she had more screen time. While Mike was engulfed in grief over losing Frank and feelings of betrayal, Danielle crafted her image as an independent star, leveraging the American Pickers brand to promote her clothing store. A former crew member revealed to the FBI that Danielle once told Mike during a 2023 argument, "Frank is done, and you'll be next if you don't listen to me." This threat left Mike living in fear, unwilling to confront her directly. 4. Revealing the mastermind behind the crime. Another trial was convened, and this time, the individual held accountable for Frank Fritz's death was not Mike Wolfe, but Danielle Colby. In February 20th, 25, the courtroom in Davenport, Iowa, once again drew public attention as Danielle Colby stood trial, accused of murdering Frank Fritz, who passed away on October 1st, 2024. Following the previous trial that focused on Mike Wolfe, a new series of evidence pointed directly to Danielle as a mastermind behind the incident. The 3-week-long trial unveiled her manipulative tactics, isolating Frank and setting up Mike, culminating in a pivotal jury verdict. Sarah Hargrove continued her role as the lead prosecutor. She commenced the trial with compelling argument, portraying Danielle as a cold and calculating individual who orchestrated Frank's murder to solidify her position in American Pickers. Grove presented surveillance footage from near Frank's residence which aligned perfectly with the timeline. Danielle was alleged to have visited Frank's home at 10 p.m., administered a neurotoxin, and then departed. Subsequently, she retrieved the footage and disposed of the glass vial by delivering it to Mike's house. On the defense side, veteran attorney Margaret Wilson, with over 2 decades of experience, led Danielle's defense team. Wilson contended that the evidence had been manipulated to falsely implicate her client. She argued that Danielle lacked any motive for the crime and that the FBI had coerced her to cover up investigative errors related to Mike. Wilson suggested that the vial found at Danielle's residence could have been planted by someone else and that the footage was insufficient to confirm poisoning. In her opening statement, she declared, Danielle Colby is a victim of a smear campaign. She cherished Frank and endeavored to help him return to the show. We will prove her innocence. However, this argument quickly faltered in the face of forensic evidence. Danielle testified on the 5th day of the trial, her voice trembling and demeanor defensive. She denied all allegations, asserting that her visit to Frank's home was solely to check on his health and that the vial in her bag was merely a decorative gift intended for Mike. When questioned about the footage retrieved from the security company, Danielle responded hesitantly, I just wanted to ensure the area's safety with no intention of concealing anything. However, when Prosecutor Harrove inquired about a handwritten note detailing the dosage of the neurotoxin found at her home, Danielle fell silent, only stating, I don't know where it came from. This unconvincing testimony, coupled with an encrypted message sent to Mike, the vial has been placed, do not open it, led the jury to question her honesty. Mike Wolf was also called to testify, delivering an emotional account. He recounted how Danielle had manipulated him since 2018 to isolate Frank, urging him to limit contact with his close friend, and eventually pushing Frank out of American Pickers in 2021. Mike choked up, saying, Danielle claimed Frank was a burden, that the show only needed me. I followed her lead because I feared losing everything, but in the end, I lost Frank, my brother. Mike also confirmed that Danielle had threatened to expose dubious financial transactions to coerce him into transferring the American Pickers brand to her in 2023. He asserted that the vial found at his home was brought there by Danielle, and that he was unaware of its toxic contents. Mike's testimony further reinforced the notion that Danielle acted out of self-interest. Lisa Fritz, Frank's sister, provided tearful testimony on behalf of the family. She sobbed, Frank trusted Danielle like family, but she betrayed him. He felt isolated, abandoned, and now we understand why. Lisa recounted that Frank had confided in her about Danielle and Mike whispering behind his back, leading him to distrust both. Her testimony, along with entries from Frank's diary, highlighted deliberate isolation, painting Danielle as cold and scheming in the eyes of the jury. Additional witnesses further elucidated Danielle's behavior. Jason Miller, a former cameraman for the show, testified that he had seen Danielle tearing pages from Frank's notebook on set in 2020. She explained at the time that it was to protect Frank. Miller also recalled a 2021 argument where Danielle told Mike that Frank is the show's biggest problem. Forensic evidence was deemed the decisive factor in the entire case. The FBI presented an analysis of the vial found at Danielle's home, which bore her fingerprints and contained traces of a neurotoxin matching the substance detected in Frank's bloodstream. The handwritten note, confirmed to be in Danielle's handwriting, detailed the method of mixing the toxin into Frank's medication, completely contradicting her testimony. Furthermore, financial documents revealed that Danielle controlled several offshore accounts that received a total of $32 million from American Pickers, including a $450,000 withdrawal made just before Frank's death, further clarifying her financial motive. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict on February 28, 2025. Danielle Colby was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and financial fraud. The jury foreperson, a retired teacher, stated, from the footage, the vial, to the messages, everything proved that Danielle meticulously planned and executed her actions with cold intent. She was dishonest, and we cannot ignore the pain she caused. The courtroom fell silent as a pale-faced Danielle was escorted away while the Fritz family embraced each other, weeping. The public, especially fans of American Pickers, expressed outrage and disappointment over the verdict. On the platform X, #JusticeForFrank and #DanielleGuilty quickly became global trends within 48 hours of the trial's conclusion, with over 3 million posts shared. Fans labeled Danielle a traitor and conveyed their sorrow upon learning that she had isolated Frank since 2018, manipulated Mike, and coldly plotted the murder. One user, at PickersFan92, wrote, "I grew up with Frank and Mike. Danielle used to be my idol, but she destroyed everything. Frank forever." Nonetheless, a small segment of fans sided with Danielle, believing she was framed, but the #FreeDanielle quickly faded. Mike's response following the trial extended beyond words. He immediately donated $500,000 from his personal account to the Crohn's Disease Foundation, a condition Frank battled throughout his life, and pledged to open a small museum in Iowa to showcase the antiques he and Frank had collected. In an Instagram post dated April 5, 2025, Mike shared, "I can't change what happened, but I can keep Frank's legacy alive. He was a true soul of American Pickers, not me." The post garnered over 1.2 million likes and thousands of comments, mostly expressions of support and sorrow for the broken friendship. Mike declined to comment further on Danielle, stating only, "Justice has been served. I just want Frank to rest in peace." Most viewers agreed that American Pickers had officially ended with a verdict. One user commented, "This is no longer about antique hunting. It's a tragedy." Mike couldn't continue alone. Under public pressure, the History Channel officially canceled the show in early May 20th, 2025, calling the case an irreplaceable loss. 5 exhumation and unexpected collection of relics. Exactly 1 year after the controversial death of Frank Fritz, public attention once again turned to a secluded cemetery on the outskirts of Iowa. The previously tranquil gravel road became congested with a long line of trucks carrying filming equipment, journalists, antique hunters, and curious onlookers. Hastily erected barricades surrounded the granite tombstone of the national treasure hunter, while the clicking sounds of cameras echoed around what was supposed to be a simple grave relocation quickly transformed into an unprecedented media frenzy. The official reason for the exhumation, the land where Frank rested, had been purchased by developers planning to expand a local history museum. Initially reluctant, his family eventually agreed to move the grave to a larger, more private memorial site 20 meters away on one condition: no cameras, no noise. However, that promise was swiftly broken when the news leaked to the local press. The wave of attention spread beyond expectations. Media outlets, social networks, and fan groups continuously shared the story. Facing public pressure, local authorities were compelled to allow a limited film crew to document the event. In return, all proceeds from the broadcast rights will be donated to the Crohn's Disease Foundation, a condition that Frank had battled for most of his adult life. The Fritz family, though still hesitant, accepted. They believed that Frank, a man who lived simply and always thought of others, would not oppose continuing to help the community even after his passing. Frank never liked drawing attention, his sister Lisa shared with the press, but he was always willing to help. This is a way for him to keep doing that. At the center of the scene appeared a special figure, Dr. Eleanor Chambers, a renowned preservation archaeologist who had overseen numerous historical excavation projects across the United States. With expertise in handling sensitive and valuable artifacts, Dr. Chambers was selected to supervise the entire exhumation process of Frank's grave. "What we prioritize is respect," she told a select group of reporters. "We are conducting this work following specialized procedures, just like any historical site relocation, and especially with absolute respect for the family's wishes." At exactly 8:30 a.m., the work officially began. A small crane slowly lifted the heavy granite slab from Frank's grave. No one spoke. A collective breath was held as what emerged beneath was not a typical coffin, but a specially designed preservation chamber. Mike Wolfe, Frank's longtime friend and companion, stood not far away, eyes red, softly saying, "This is exactly what Frank wanted." Mike recounted that Frank once joked that if he ever passed away, he wanted to be buried with his favorite photos and a few of his most important belongings. "At the time, we thought he was just kidding," Mike sighed, but after his stroke in 2022, he began to prepare seriously and made it a reality. When the preservation team opened the sealed chamber, a gasp of astonishment echoed in the silent space. In the dim morning light, the items inside sparkled, forming one of the most remarkable personal Americana collections ever recorded. Even close friends had never seen these items. They were stored in separate compartments surrounding the coffin, each carefully selected by Frank in his final years as if he were building his own American museum, a personal legacy without words. Dr. Chambers, overseeing the entire process, could hardly believe her eyes. Over 2 decades in preservation work, she told the media, "I've never seen anything like this. This isn't just a collection, it's a profound slice of history presented through the perspective of a very special individual." Her gaze stopped at an item near the head of the coffin, a 1934 original Indian motorcycle. The motorcycle still retained its original paint and documents linked to its first owner, a Midwestern mail carrier, who once traveled the rural routes. Frank discovered it in a dilapidated barn in Iowa in 2019, but had never made this find public. Experts present at the scene valued the motorcycle at over $300,000. However, as Mike Wolfe said, its true value can't be measured in money. Not far from there was a weathered wooden box containing a bundle of handwritten letters, something that left historians astonished. The sender, Thomas Edison; the recipient, a young female inventor forgotten by history. The content revealed a secret collaboration that may have contributed to some of Edison's most notable inventions. Later, experts confirmed the letters were authentic, a discovery capable of rewriting a part of American scientific history. However, amid that treasure, there was a quiet corner that brought tears to all who witnessed it, a collection of handcrafted toy cars, each bearing the name of a child who had been treated at Iowa Children's Hospital. Staff revealed that Frank had quietly volunteered there for many years. He taught the children to assemble miniature versions of classic cars as part of psychological therapy. After each session, he kept one car as a personal reminder of friendship, hope, and connection beyond all boundaries. But the most touching item lay at the end of the coffin, a small leather-bound diary embossed with words of real discoveries. Inside wasn't a list of items that had appeared on television, but the everyday stories behind them, from families, artisans, farmers, and mechanics, ordinary Americans whom Frank had met on his journey. The notebook revealed a truth that perhaps the audience had never realized. Frank wasn't merely a collector of old items. He was an unofficial historian, quietly recording each piece of American life through every person he had encountered. After carefully considering all aspects, the Fritz family agreed to the proposal of organizing an exhibition with one condition. The entire collection must be permanently housed in a dedicated museum in Fritz's hometown. Frank spent his whole life bringing forgotten treasures back into the public eye, Lisa Fritz shared. Now it's those very objects that will continue to tell the stories he cherished more than anything else. For 3 consecutive days, conservation experts meticulously catalogued and removed each artifact from the storage room, carefully noting its original placement along with any handwritten notes left behind by Fritz himself. The entire process was streamed live across multiple digital platforms, accompanied by historians who offered background information and analysis. Every time a new item was revealed, viewer numbers shattered all records, not just because of the artifact's value, but because audiences were witnessing a side of Frank Fritz never seen before. Beyond being an avid collector, Fritz, through his own collection, revealed himself to be a gifted storyteller, an unofficial historian of everyday American life. The transfer of his remains, once the full collection had been retrieved, took place in a quiet, solemn atmosphere. Fritz's casket was brought to its new resting place in a convoy of vintage vehicles driven by his closest friends and longtime colleagues. The memorial monument was designed by Mike Wolfe in collaboration with the Fritz family, and it bore the unmistakable style of classic roadside American architecture. It was a simple yet powerful tribute to the man who had roamed countless rural roads in pursuit of lost history. In the weeks that followed, small museums and historical societies across the U.S. reported a dramatic surge in visitors, a movement the media dubbed the Fritz Effect. People began to take a greater interest in the heritage of their own communities, the stories, the relics, and the individuals that had once been overlooked or forgotten. Fritz's small leather-bound journal, preserved and digitized, became the foundation for a new project aimed at recording the memories of everyday Americans. Simultaneously, the Fritz Scholarship was established to support researchers working to preserve history and memory, especially in rural regions that are often neglected. 1 year after Frank Fritz's death, the man who quietly safeguarded fragments of Americana achieved something no one had expected. he made the most profound impact of his entire life. That final collection didn't just contain old objects. It reshaped how we think about history and the hidden value within seemingly ordinary things. Yet, the antique-loving community still hadn't come to terms with his loss. The grief deepened when early reports emerged indicating the FBI's involvement in Frank's death, a shocking revelation. A tragedy, once thought closed, had reopened like an unhealable crack. A wave of questions began to surface, but no answers came. His grieving family suddenly found themselves swept into a new storm, one filled with chaos and suspicion. Frank Fritz, the antique hunter with passionate eyes and a heart anchored in history, was once the soul of American pickers on the History Channel. Alongside Mike Wolfe, he traveled the back roads of America, scouring abandoned barns and dusty corners to bring forgotten items back into the light. It wasn't just a TV show. It was a journey to preserve the memories of a nation. Viewers adored Frank not just for his deep knowledge of vintage toys, classic motorcycles, or rusted oil cans, but for his down-to-earth nature, his authenticity, and the childlike excitement he radiated every time he discovered a rare find. With millions tuning in each week, Frank wasn't just a host. He was the embodiment of a bygone America, familiar, nostalgic, and deeply human. Frank Fritz dedicated his life to journeys, to the pursuit of lost memories, and to the storytelling power of old things. But it is his final story, the one marked by tragedy and unanswered questions, that is now clouded in a haze of deceit, betrayal, and fractured relationships once thought unbreakable. Danielle Colby, who stood beside him on screen for over a decade, now faces what feels like a life sentence. And yet the truth has not been uncovered, and the investigation is still ongoing. If you want to continue following this gripping mystery and the explosive revelations that are slowly coming to light, don't forget to subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the story of Frank Fritz isn't over yet, and the secrets are still lurking in the shadows.